as I go. Should I look both ways before you cross me, baby? 'Cause I don't break for boys. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. Got nothing left to say. Let's be on my way. Best of luck. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. I got a new life. He runs for miles. 67 fastback. Oh, it's just my style. We're headed down the road. Just enjoy the show. Watch me as I go. Should look both ways before you cross me, baby, 'cause I don't break for boys. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. Got nothing left to say. Let's be on my way. Best of luck. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. I'm moving on. Should look both ways before you cross me, baby, 'cause I don't break for boys. I'm moving on. Got nothing left to say. Let's be on my way. Best of luck. I'm moving on. Got nothing left to say. Let's be on my way. Best of luck. I'm moving on. Got nothing left to say. Let's be on my way. Best of luck. I'm moving on. I'm moving on.
Hey, welcome. Well, none of that's true. Let me get rid of that. Go away. That's not happening. Welcome to the altar, everyone. My name is Colby Martin, and I am the host for the show this afternoon, or evening, or morning. I still haven't figured out if anybody watches this in the morning. Is it morning in Australia tomorrow? It's still morning, I think, in Hawaii. Do I have any Hawaii watchers at some point? Anyway, I'm excited for today's show because it's going to be a little more open-ended, which is to say I want to respond to some of the comments and the questions, the concerns, the feedback, the pushback that I've been receiving over the last several weeks as I've engaged with the topic of why it is that I think, for the most part, Christians who identify as affirming of LGBTQ people should leave their church if their church is not itself affirming. So anyway, all that and maybe a little bit more, but maybe not. Maybe we'll just hang out with that and with whatever things you want to discuss today on the altar. I'm glad you're with us. Let's go. Right on. I think I'm working on a potential logo change. I don't know if I'm sold on this yet, but maybe you've seen my previous logo. Let's see, do I have it on here? Where is it? Anyway, I don't know. I can't figure out a brand look for this show. I keep changing things. As many of you know, it used to be called Perspective Shift, but that got silly because I also have a weekly newsletter that I write called Perspective Shift. And originally this show just began as like a public live reading of those articles. And so I just called it Perspective Shift, but then that got confusing to have a newsletter and a live show. So then I rebranded it to The Altar, and I've gone through a couple logo iterations, and I don't know. I just don't know. So like in that opening video that you just saw, was the logo that I've been using for the last multiple weeks. Is it this one? It's so big. No, the altar call. Oh, that was good. Good job, Colby. Let's get rid of that. That's not even the right logo. But anyway, so I'm working on this guy down here, and I kind of like it. I kind of like it. I like the way it looks, especially with this slide. But I don't know. So it's a work in progress. So glad you're with me today. I was a little late getting started, and I usually when that happens, some people think, oh, I guess Colby's not going today. So maybe they check that. Maybe, but hopefully they'll come back. Come back, people who were hanging out waiting for 2 p.m. and then 2 p.m. came and left, and I still wasn't here. I needed to like get some food in my system and some drink in my system, and I realized, oh, it's 1:50. I gotta hurry up. Anyway, in the pre-show, I had a question asking what you're doing this weekend, or if you did anything fun last weekend. And some of you, let's see, Brian says, I may get out for a drive if it's nice enough. Brian, where's home for you? What are the odds that it will be nice? Do you live anywhere other than like East Coast? Is East Coast still getting dumped on by snow? Mercy says that my nephew and his boyfriend are having their birthday party this weekend. Sure to be the highlight. That sounds delightful. I think I'm also going to be attending a birthday party this weekend, but I think it's for twins, and they're like 5 or 6 or 4. Shoot, I don't know how old they are. Jack and Salem, if you're watching, don't take offense, but I just don't remember people's ages very well. Oh, thanks, Melissa. Melissa says picture, background lighting, colors, looks amazing. Much love from several states away. Glad to have you. I've been enjoying tweaking, sort of the nonstop. I'm a nonstop tweaker when it comes to working on things. In fact, I was doing a podcast with someone last week. Yeah, last week. She was interviewing me for her podcast. I'll let you know when the episode's out. And she asked me to pick 3 words to describe myself. And I got to tell you, that was not easy for me. I ended up, let's see if I can remember the 3 words that I chose. One of them was improve. That's what came to mind right now. Like, one word is improve. I'm constantly trying to improve. And it's not, I kind of like that part of me, but also it can get a bit much. Like when I can't just settle into good enough, being good enough. And so I'm constantly tweaking and trying to add and always trying to get better. What was another one? Patient. I don't know if that's the best. Patient is an ideal that I really strive to. And I think there are some contexts where I'm really good at that and I could be really patient. And then there's other contexts where I have a lot of growth to do. But I think that it's a decent word for me. What was the third one? Patient, improve, and oh my gosh, if it comes to me later, I'll tell you. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Melissa, you were just saying that everything looks nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so Brian's in Louisville. So I think my prediction is you will get a nice weekend and you will get out for a drive. Shane was cooking dinner. Glad to have you here, Shane. Billy Likey, the new logo, Tommy Boy reference. Hey, listen, Bill, I want everyone to know that all Tommy Boy references are welcome here in this show. I loved that movie growing up. I have not watched it in probably 20 years, and I'm kind of afraid to watch it. I'm really not sure if I'll still like it, so I like preserving it in my mind as this wonderful comedy with the late Chris Farley. Yeah, Mercy, your birthday party is likely going to be more fun. Okay, so here's what I wanted to do today is, as many of you know, the last 4 weeks over on my, let's just go to the perspective shift slide here. Over on my Substack page, perspectiveshift.co, I've been writing a series of articles all around this topic of Christians who identify as affirming, which is to say their posture toward LGBTQ people is one of acceptance and celebration, that queer people are beloved children of God just as they are. To be affirming is to say that you would support 2 people of the same sex being married, etc. So an affirming Christian, if they attend a church that is non-affirming, and this is the thing I've been talking about for several weeks. In fact, last week, if you caught the show, I had my buddy Josh Lee on, and Josh is a pastor at a Forefront Brooklyn church, and I really liked a lot of what Josh had to say. So if you missed that episode, go check it out. It's on my YouTube channel and Facebook page. And he was helping to point out that there are different kind of churches within even the spectrum of this topic. So you have like the full, like our church, Sojourn, totally open and affirming and celebratory. So we have, for instance, like this Love Wins sign behind me that hangs out in my studio was originally created by Jamie and Michael Lynn, two friends of ours who have been Sojourn from the beginning, and they made it because there was one son a couple of years ago for Pride Month. We did a thing at Sojourn called LGBTQ Takeover, and the whole entire Sunday was entirely queer led and queer centered, and everybody from who made the coffee and brought the treats to who did the music to who gave the message that day, all of it was just our queer community. So we are fully affirming and fully celebratory. Then you have churches that are, you might say, affirming. So like, yeah, if you ask them, they would affirm queer people, but they don't make a big deal out of it. It's maybe not a thing that they put a lot of focus on. You might have to dig a little bit to find out, but yeah, they are affirming. And then you kind of move down, then you have the open but not affirming, which is all people are welcome. We love everyone. Everyone's welcome here. But then the closer you get to like leadership positions or theology of marriage, then you discover there's fine print. This is the bait and switch where everybody's welcome, but actually, if you're gay, you need to not be gay. And then you have like at the far end, real antagonistic churches that are just very anti-LGBTQ in their rhetoric and their teaching and their theology. So anyway, so there's a spectrum of churches, and I, in my work, run into the question a lot for those who themselves are affirming and desire to be celebratory with their posture. If they attend a church that is kind of in this middle / over here ground of churches that are not really affirming, like, what are my thoughts on that? So that's what I've been writing about. I started with 5 reasons why I think that affirming Christians say, this is sort of the reasons why, like, well, I stay in my church, and I stay in my church because I stay because of the community and the relationships that I've already built there. I stay because it's what I've always known, familiarity and convenience. Sorry, it's a little small on the screen there. Let's see if I can. Reason number 3, to be a change maker. Well, then it kind of cut the words off, but it's fine. We'll be fine. I'm only staying on here for a second. People say they stay because they want to be a safe place for either current or potential future queer people. So they say, I want to stay in this church because people who, are LGBTQ, especially if they don't have affirming families, I want them to know that there are safe people in the church. And then some people say because, hey, look, this church isn't perfect, but I'm not looking for a perfect church. I'm looking for a church that meets needs A, B, and C. And so even though it might not have the theology that I want, I still get a lot of a lot of value from the church. So anyway, and then a couple weeks ago, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, I kind of just came out and said, look, I think there are compelling reasons why you should leave, why you should not stay. And I invite you to go and read those if you want. I talk about it being a justice issue. I think it's wrong to deny queer people leadership and to tell them that they're abominations and to not affirm same-sex marriage. So I think it's wrong. And so staying at a church that is wrong, I think also could be considered wrong. Number 2, talk about lukewarm complicity and how, just because it doesn't personally affect you doesn't necessarily mean that you should just sort of hang out there. Number 3, the queer people in your life are watching. So if you make some substantive changes to your life, such as leaving a church that you love for other reasons, but you realize I can no longer stay there because of their position on this, like that signals to the queer people in your life that you are a serious ally, or that you take this stuff seriously. Anyway, again, I won't belabor the point because you can go read all this at perspectiveshift.co. I think churches need to feel the pinch. I think people that are affirming need to stop supporting, especially with their dollars. And then I talk about the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. There's a lot of beautiful, holy, good work out here to do. And we need you out here. We need you out here. So stop supporting churches like that and come out here and do the work. Anyway, so what I thought I'd do today, and in conjunction with what I'm about to do here, anybody's welcome to comment, question, whether it's on this topic or others. This is kind of just an open-ended show here today. I want to share some of the feedback that I've gotten and respond to some of the questions and some of the concerns with you. So the first few things that I'm going to pull from here are from the perspective shift from the Substack page itself. And then I'm going to turn to Instagram because there was a lot of commenting action on the Instagram there. So no, not other observations. I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to go this. So here's a comment from Damien on the first article in this series. And Damien says this: as you preface in this article, there are many factors involved in someone's decision to belong to a church community that professes contradictory beliefs to our internal convictions. And then here's the meat of it. Something that I feel needs further consideration is that there's a big spectrum of churches in the affirming and non-affirming camps. I talked about this a minute ago, kind of the different ways that where churches could fall in that. Some churches promote harmful theology, which is toxic, and any thoughtful and compassionate person would do leave that. And I would be shocked if we really found many affirming Christians in these churches that are on this super hostile end of the spectrum. But then there are churches that take kind of this don't ask, don't tell approach. This is what I mentioned as kind of the bait and switch. Like everybody's welcome, but not really. I personally, Damien says, spent over a decade in this type of church. And while I feel God did remarkable things in and through me, and we're not going to discount that, I missed out on the ability to connect authentically with my fellow brothers and sisters. It felt lonely, to be honest, continually wondering if people would accept me if they knew that I was gay. So Damien's saying, I know what it's like to be in a church that is not fully open and affirming. They are open but not affirming. And Damien says it was a beautiful place in many ways, but I also, always wondered how would it go if people knew that I was gay. And then Damien says there's also churches like the one that I currently belong to, which focus on a central point, such as movement toward Christ, and not a focus on the boundaries of what you should and shouldn't believe to belong. This sounds like what is often called a centered set church as opposed to boundaried set. So you put some things at the center, and if you're moving towards that, that's great. We can all get along, as opposed to boundary set, which is here are the parameters of what you need to believe in order to belong here. Damien says they're about spiritual growth and movement rather than statements and policies. In this type of church, so this is what I thought was interesting. Damien says in this type of church, where the focus is not about boundaried beliefs, but it's about what's at the center and what are we moving toward. Damien says a person who believes that a marriage should only be one man and one woman, and then a person who believes that God blesses gay marriage, Damien says these two can sit around the table and share life together. Then he writes, I believe in a diverse group of people that come together and affirm each other as created in the image of God, regardless of beliefs and choices. It brings glory and honor to God. So I pulled this comment out because, Damien, thank you for sharing. I think your story, your entire story is very, very needed in this space, which is that you spent time in a open but non-affirming church, and that impacted your capacity to build community and authentic relationships there. And so you moved to a different church now that, you don't necessarily tell us if it is an affirming church. It sounds like you're describing it as a church that maybe either doesn't have a stance on that, although I don't know if that's really possible, or at least just doesn't make it a thing that they talk about much. But my hunch is the church that you're describing does have a theologically affirming position. And I think this is part of why you're attending there. If I understand correctly, like you spent your time in the non-affirming church and now you're in an affirming church, but what you're applauding about it is that it welcomes to the table people that have different perspectives on this issue. And I think what's important here, in my mind anyway, is yes, I understand what you're saying, that having a centered set sort of ecclesiology where it's about what you're moving toward, not what you're defined. That is great, and I applaud that. And it works, in my opinion, for you because it is a theologically affirming space. And people who are not affirming can find belonging there. Yes, but so can you, as opposed to the previous church that you were at, where if they would have shifted to trying to be a centered set ecclesiology as well, it's still like not affirming for you. Anyway, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I was reading this and it struck me as it sounds like your church tries to create space for non-affirming people to belong, which is great. But I think at the core, part of why this model works is because the people who have historically, one of the people who've been marginalized in these types of churches are affirmed as belonging at the table. Anyway, one of my, I'm going to skip that thought. Okay. So thank you. That was comment from Damien. Now here's something from Odette, which I found really great. There's 2 slides here with Odette. So Odette lives in Puerto Rico. You can see that in the small little tag there. Puerto Rico is a small island, Odette says, with a conservative majority. So I don't really know anyone like me. So Odette writes, I began volunteering in the children's ministry, but when they realized my sexual orientation, they told me that because they hold a traditional family view that I could not volunteer in that area, but I could do others like outreach. And I only laugh because I find the line that conservative churches draw to be not just arbitrary, but like weird sometimes. And it's informed by, I think in some cases, informed by, a lot by ignorance. We see this a lot with churches that like, no, you can't work with kids because there's still this ignorant belief that queer people are a special kind of danger to young people. And this is homophobic, talk about misinformation. This is antiquated homophobic misinformation, rooted in really bad ideas. So anyway, but this is the kind of mentality that churches like Odette have is, oh yeah, great. You're gay. We're so glad that you're here. Here, you can go over here and you can serve, but not over here. And don't at all think you can never have leadership. And if you want to marry someone of the same sex, you're going to have to look elsewhere. Odette says, people were realizing my sexual orientation through social media. It's not that I hold a sign with me that says it, although I like that, Odette, idea of you walking into church one day with the sign. When they told me that I could not volunteer in the kids ministry, I felt hurt. And for the first time in my life, discriminated against. I'm so sorry. You do not deserve that. Did not deserve that. But even so, I accepted it and made myself available to volunteer in the areas that they'll allow me to. My intention was to help where they needed and to create relationships no matter the ministry. And the second part of that comment, as for me, I continue to volunteer, donate, and create relationships in the church with the hope that my experience at least, and this is why I chose this comment, Odette, because I love what you're saying here. Will at least serve as an example of how you can be Christian and gay, serve in the church, and be in a community who think differently from you and still be able to harmonize everything and focus on copying the love and the way we relate to others as Jesus taught. Odette, I applaud you. I send you all love and light and strength because I can't imagine how challenging that must be at times. But I think it's a beautiful and noble and worthwhile endeavor to say, look, I know that I'm not fully affirmed here and it hurts that I can't even serve in some of the places, but this is my community and I want them to see me. This is what my wife, Kate, talks about when she preaches on Jesus saying, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them also the left cheek. Like the idea there is that you demand dignity. Like you will see me. You can't just push me to the side and ignore me. And this is what I hear you saying, Odette, is y'all ain't going nowhere. I'm a Christian and I'm gay and I'm here. And I think that what am I going to tell you to leave, Odette? You follow your what seems right to you in this context. And then you also, in the comments, you talk about how also you don't have other options down there. And that's one thing we're going to get to here in a minute, is the number of people that reached out and said, cool, like what you're saying, Colby, I'm with you, but I don't have any options where I live. So what do you want from me? So I'll get to that in a minute. But Odette, I think it's beautiful. And I love when you show up here. I love when you're part of this community, and you are fully welcome to be you. And if I had a children's ministry here at the altar, you could lead that thing. All right. Okay. Here's a message from Charlene. Yeah, Susan, thank you for giving the love to Odette. I feel that too. Oh, Odette's actually here. Fantastic. Well, how fun is that? All right. You're the coolest, Odette. Just want you to know. Thank you for sharing that with us. So Charlene left this comment. Charlene says, my husband and I worked mightily to persuade people. So she's talking about her experience of being at a church. I think she tells for 23 years they're at this church. And the church was getting ready to make a significant decision to potentially leave their denomination and go towards something that was reverting, you might say, to a more staunch, traditional, conservative stance on this. So Charlene says, my husband and I worked to persuade people to stay with the PCUSA, the denomination the church was a part of. We participated, she wrote, in a dissenting group that we called the Fairness Group. We wrote blog posts. We went to meetings. We determined that if the final vote was indeed to leave the PCUSA, we would look for another church that didn't have a problem with the definition of marriage as a covenant between two people. Charlene says, when the final vote came, our church of 23 years left the PCUSA to join the ECO. And the ECO, she explained earlier, was the new thing that was like, no, marriage is just one man, one woman. So we left, Charlene says, and we joined another affirming PCUSA church in our neighborhood. That's real. That's like leaving a church that you were a part of for over 2 decades. That's no small thing. And I know, Charlene, that you didn't leave this comment because you want any sort of applause or so. You're sharing your story, which I asked for. I asked for the stories, and so thank you for sharing. But good gravy, that's incredible. That's incredible that someone would find within them and we'll talk about this here in a minute as well, when we come up against these conflict of values, to choose the one that is going to undoubtedly bring separation and potential loneliness and sadness. Like, freaking amazing. 23 years and you left. Charlene says, yeah, we were criticized for leaving. I don't know how many times someone told us, but the Bible clearly says. Yeah, well, we all know how I think about that around here. We were accused of being bitter and abandoning our friends. Through the Fairness Group, And then the next part of her comment said this. And then in 2019, so all this took place like 5-6 years earlier. Then in 2019, Charlene says, our child came out to us as a transgender woman. And because of our experience with the church split, she knew we would be affirming. This is what I was talking about a couple weeks ago on the show, and what I made that little video for. Like, parents, leave your non-affirming church, because there might come a day where one of your kids either needs to come out to you or wants to share with you their what's true about them, their sexual orientation, or their gender identity. And if you are still attending a non-affirming church, they might be questioning and wondering, well, I know my parents say lip service, like, if any of you kids ever come out, know that we love, but they also keep staying at this church. But here Charlene's like, no. That was actually our story. We left the church over this particular issue. And then a few years later, when our child came out, like, they knew without a shadow of a doubt that we were safe and affirming with them. Like, that is the gold, people. That's the gold. She and her wife have chosen to attend an Episcopal church that has a larger queer community. In the end, only 5 families left the former church for more affirming churches. Yes, we lost friends, but we gained new ones. Yes, that happens. To all of you who might be watching this or listening to this later and haven't yet made that decision to leave your non-affirming church, like, I know you will lose friends, but you will also gain ones. And what you can know is that you might even gain better friends. Oh, is that allowed? Am I allowed to say that? I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Maybe they're not better friends, but they're different friends. They'll be built on an openness and authenticity and some shared values that maybe might be holding you back. Like, remember Damien's comment from a few minutes ago? Spent all that time in that church, but never really was able to fully like develop authentic relationships because there was that part of him that he was hiding back. This is true as well in this conversation. But most of all, Charlene says, we didn't lose our daughter, and our daughter didn't lose her faith. I mean, this is what it's all about here, people. Freaking love it, man. All right. Then next comment. Let's see. Got a comment over here from Chris Moore. Chris says, atheist here. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the altar. Glad you're here. By the time I was born in the 90s, it was a non-issue in Canada over a federal Supreme Court decision, in the public at least. Although vocalization and pride didn't start until about 2005, but I don't know. I'm straight and barely started puberty by that time, so I wouldn't mind hearing stories about the experience at that time. Thanks for sharing here, Chris. I don't know if anybody, if we have any Canadian watchers that can share their experience there. Oh, Charlene, you're also watching. Look at all these people who I'm pulling comments from just happen to be with us today. I love it. Charlene, thank you so much for sharing that story with me so that I could then share it with everyone here. All right, this comment came from, I want to say Tanashi, but I put their name up there so at least you could maybe pronounce it better than me if you know. But Tanashi wrote this. Tanashi says, I'm reading a Bible plan. It's on creativity, but I came across this line that I think sometimes really works in this case. And then he quotes, not only do we see Jesus participating in the cultural rituals that came before him, but he also operated within those traditions to transform them and make something altogether new. And I really like that perspective a lot. That Jesus was not, his goal here was not to create a new religion. His goal was to reform Judaism, to move it forward into in some ways, I would say, new directions, and in some ways returning to the original impetus of his religion. So then Tanashi wrote, like you said, Colby, it's not always the best decision to stay in a church and try and change it from the within. Most times there's no point in trying. That's the case for me. But there's nowhere to go. I live in Zimbabwe and there are no affirming churches. So this seems like the best route to take, to stay in the church and try and change it, to try and do what Jesus did. Although that is not an easy task because the culture in and out of church is a very authoritarian and male-dominated one. Long journey ahead, but it's one that's worth it. And I wanted to include this because this is a perspective, this is a comment that I received in some version of this quite a bit, which is, Colby, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you, but in my context, in my situation, for whatever the reasons, I don't really have the luxury, the privilege, the opportunity to go to an affirming church. So I'm going to, for now, stay at my non-affirming church. And let me just, actually, I'm going to keep that up there for a second. And I want to be real clear that for individuals like Tanashi and others who might have shared a similar story with me, may you not hear in my strongly worded article, like 5 reasons you should leave. I pray you do not hear words of judgment, words of condemnation. I don't have feelings toward individuals that are in this situation. I don't have feelings of disappointment. I don't have feelings like that would even matter, but I don't have feelings of disappointment or a sense that you should do something different. Okay. Like I said a minute ago with Odette, there are people that make the choices they make for very good reasons. And not that anybody's asking for it, but if they want my support, I sign off on it. Okay. And this is especially the case, like in Odette, or like in her case, she identifies as LGBTQ. And I think that matters as well, that what do I mean by that? Let me just speak with me. It matters for me when I come to this issue that I might have a different tone or a different posture towards like a straight individual staying in a non-affirming church versus someone who's from the LGBTQ community staying in the church. which is to say, and in fact, I think there's someone, I tried to find some of the comments on Instagram that I really, really liked and wanted to share. So I'm going to try to pull some of those up. If you're interested, you can go to my Instagram page and the posts where I share those little icons like this one, 5 reasons affirming Christians stay in non-affirming churches. This is where I'll be pulling some of these from. Let me go here. Other observations. See if I can find the one I wanted to specifically point at here in this situation. Well, this isn't exactly what I was getting at, but this is a great comment. Someone said, I think labeling a reason as invalid, because in that first article, I talked about the 5 reasons why people stay. And then I sort of assessed from my own sense, like, is that a good reason to stay? Is it a valid reason to stay? This person says, I think labeling a reason as invalid disregards other factors that could be at play, such as low mental health or physical health that could be a significant barrier to finding an affirming church. And I said, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing. That's not something I took into as much into consideration as I could have. That there are other reasons why individuals might need to and or want to and or might just be good for them to stay. And I don't ever want to discount that. So this person says, a church community can be so much like a family system. I thought this was very insightful. This is Laura Carr 22. Sometimes leaving dysfunction is not so cut and dry. That's the truth. There's nuance in the relationships and the power dynamics and the individual's access, etc. Similar to why a victim might stay in an abusive relationship. Should they leave? Yeah, of course they should, but it isn't always that simple. She said, or they said, just sharing this to invite some more nuance and complexity. So I got so people have really been engaging with this and had really expanded upon some of my ideas and thoughts and really give some good pushback and insight. So I by no means do I have all the right or smart or good answers. Let's see if I can find another one that I really, really liked here. So we can get into this here. Well, first I'll say that most of the interaction has been agreement, especially around the idea of the leaving. Like, yeah, if your church is not affirming, you should leave. You should leave. And then there have been all these other sort of caveats and instances where there's more things to take into consideration. But for the most part, this is a shared idea. This is a shared value. This is a shared concept here. But then a lot of people, and I mentioned this a minute ago, a lot of people had a response similar to this one. Shani Hoke says, good thoughts here. Thanks for sharing. But I have a question. What about affirming folks who live in rural or conservative areas where it's hard to find any affirming church at all, let alone one that's dedicated to Jesus, focused teaching with good nuance, critical textual analysis, theological depth, other issues? For some folks, the options are go to a church that I don't align with, or go to a church where I know I won't grow spiritually, or don't go to church at all. None of these are great, of course, but I personally choose the first option over the latter two. And this was probably the single biggest pushback / criticism / follow-up question to this series is, okay, but there's not a church around that I can go to that is both affirming and, I don't know, is the kind of church that I enjoy, or the kind of church that I'm used to, or the kind of church that is sort of organized around the things that are really important to me. And sometimes that means like there could be Episcopal churches or there are Lutheran churches or kind of just different styles of churches that may not have the appeal. Their theology might be really solid in that perspective, but the way the services are organized, the way the community does it is not what people are looking for. And that makes sense to me. So I like how this person summarized it. It's like either I go to a church that I don't agree with everything, or I go to a church where I agree with the theology, but like the rest of it doesn't really do it for me, or I don't go to church at all. Okay. So here's what I want to say to those of you who might be in this sort of context where you are still attending a non-affirming church for whatever the reasons might be. I want to offer you 3 things to consider. And all of these are driven from a place of how can you do this with integrity? How might you imagine remaining in a non-affirming church while still being true to your values and your convictions? Here's my 3 thoughts on that. Number 1 is this. Are you telling people? Which is to say, if you're attending a non-affirming church, but you yourself are affirming, does the community that you are participating in know that about you? Are you open and transparent with it? I'm not saying you got to come with picket signs. I'm not saying you got to be antagonistic. I'm not saying you got to be argumentative about it, but I am saying, are you clear about it? Like, does the leadership know? Does your small group know? Do the people that you serve with know? Like, can you to remain at a church like that with integrity? I think it's important that people know this about you. That, hey, I've been going to this church for 15 years and I love it for A, B, and C. But I need you to know that however many years ago, it became real clear to me that our theology around sexual orientation and gender identity is missing the mark substantially. And I feel differently about it. But this is still my community and I'm going to stay here for the time being. But I want it to be known that I do not condemn my queer siblings, that I attend same-sex marriages or weddings and have a great time. Okay, so number 1, are you telling people? Number 2, can you look for opportunities to engage this topic, to engage this issue? Here's what I mean. I just said it in number 1, you don't have to be antagonistic or aggressive about it, but can you look for opportunities to engage it? So when Pride Month rolls around, can you suggest to your leadership, hey, what if we put something in the lobby with some resources for people who are looking for healthy options for how to work through some of their trauma? Could we maybe put a rainbow flag out front just for a month? Now, chances are they're going to say no to all this, but what my point here is how can you stay with integrity? I think part of that is not only do you tell people, but you look for opportunities, you look for ways to look, if the boat is ever going to move, it's going to move with small little adjustments over a long period of time. So how can you be a part of these small little adjustments? Hey, I would love to lead a book study of this book, UnClobber, by this guy that I know. Can I lead a group through that? No, that doesn't really align with our values. Okay. A year later, maybe try again. Hey, is there any chance I could do like, do you see what I mean? Look for opportunities to engage it. Be aware that your presence there is great, but if you're not actually sort of being intentional about being, because a lot of people said, look, I stay there because I want to be a part of the change. That's great. What are you doing? Do you actually have a plan? Are you actually being intentional about trying to be a part of the change? Okay. That's the second thing. Number 1, tell people. Number 2, look for opportunities to engage this issue. And then number 3 is this. Could you maybe use your dollar support in a way that is more in alignment with your convictions? So if you're giving to your church and it's non-affirming, could you consider maybe splitting that tithe or splitting that donation up and still supporting your home church? Because I think people who are in community should support the larger community, not just extract from them all the time. Although obviously that money conversation has a whole other caveat that we're not going to have time to get into, but keep supporting that church, but can you split and then maybe support another church that is affirming or another organization? Could you find a nonprofit organization that helps queer kids? Can you, like our church will always take donations because because we're a church. I don't know if that needed to be said, but could you maybe use your dollars in a way that is more in alignment with your current theology? So anyway, so those are my kind of 3 thoughts on the individual who says, I love what you're saying, but I live in an area where there's no other options. So what do you want from me? And I think that's that would be my suggestion / that would be my ask. That's my ask of you. If leaving the church is not an option for you, although now let me put that to bed and go to another part of this, which is life, and my wife and I talk about this a lot. Life is a constant set. In fact, I'm going to go to just this here. Oh, hey, Tito. Tito says, loving the shirt. Thanks, buddy. Oh, hi, Angela. I did feel a bit judged by some posts. Completely reasonable. I own the part that was coming out a little bit strong and not leaving enough room for space and nuance. So I hope that today's episode felt better to you. So here's the last thing I'll say on this, and then I'll wrap up the show. Life is as I understand, as I've experienced it. Gosh, I'm having a hard time getting all the words out today. Life is nothing if not a constant navigation of conflicting values. We're constantly engaging with moments in life where we have values that compete with one another, and we have to make a choice. Which one's going to win? Which one in this situation is the one that's going to get priority? Very rarely in life do we get to have our guiding values and then just live smooth sailing and be able to, like, consistently and with integrity always live them out. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in parenting. Always having to navigate conflicting values. Doesn't work that way in relationships, dating, marriage relationships. Always having to navigate conflicting values. Doesn't work in this church spiritual community world. We're always having to navigate conflicting values. And so what could you imagine doing when one of your values is to be a person who advocates for LGBTQ inclusion, to be a person who doesn't support organizations that are anti-LGBTQ? Like, you have this value, but then you have this other value of being a part of community and doing life together with people that you love and have known for years. Maybe your church has other fantastic ways in which they live out the good news of the kingdom. You might have a fantastic, for instance, racial justice arm of the church, and you love being involved in it for that reason. Or they might have a fantastic food pantry, or they might have a fantastic kitchen that serves the homeless, or they might have all these other ministries or things that they do that for you are life-giving, and you have this conflicting value and you can't live them both out. You can't. So what do? You're always having to make a trade-off. Which one wins? And I understand that for some people in those conflicting values, the one that wins is, these are my churches where I've gone. I'm going to stay. I know it's not perfect. But then there are other people, and this is what, this is why I shared Charlene's story earlier. Other people that say, you know what, the value that's going to win right here, come what may. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen to my community. I don't know what's going to happen to all these other things that I've done for 23 years. But the value that's going to win today in this conflict is my internal commitment to inclusion and to full affirmation. So to you who might be in context where you really don't have a great option, you really don't. And I completely understand that. In fact, one person on one of my Instagram posts was like, yeah, Colby, sounds good and all, but can you start more churches like Sojourn? Because we need more of those out here. To which I've said, yeah, let me still figure out how to do Sojourn, because I'm like 9 years into it and I'm still like, I don't know, is this thing working? Which it is working. It's a beautiful community, but the idea of trying to do more around the world feels a bit much. So probably not going to have a whole bunch of new churches around the country in the next 5-10 years. So for those who are having to make this choice, if you stay, can you stay with integrity? And what might that look like? I gave you 3 ideas. Maybe you can come up with other ideas. Again, to recap, my ideas were just be open about it. Make sure people understand. Look for opportunities to engage on this issue, so that if there are these cracks where the light can be let in, then you are constantly sort of there to help move the thing forward. And then 3, can you maybe give some of your money to another church, another organization, so that you're not just supporting the non-affirming church. But then maybe you're ready to leave. Maybe you're ready to stare at these conflicting values and say, yeah, I'll lose my community. Yeah, I'll lose the way that this church provided other ministry opportunities. But maybe I'm ready to take a stand on this. Maybe this is a significant enough justice issue. And look, not everybody is going to be as driven or as driven by or as motivated by this particular topic as I am and as others are. And I get that. I really do. I don't live under this illusion that everybody needs to have the same level of passion and enthusiasm and conviction on all the topics. I can very easily imagine a person like myself in a different context that is saying things like, if you believe in climate change and you attend a church that denies climate change, you should leave. And like for them, they're one of the driving things in their life is tending to the planet and helping reduce climate change and all the environmentalism. And for them to imagine anyone going to a church that doesn't like see that as a priority for them is like, that's so wrong. I appreciate and I hold space for that. And I'm aware that this particular topic for me sits in a place of import and priority, and it may not be for other people. And I am not going to say to those other people that they're doing it wrong, that they are less than, that they just haven't figured it out yet, that they're doing something wrong. That's not the posture that I take. I know that we can't be equally passionate about every single matter of justice and injustice. We can't. We have limited bandwidth. And so I understand, like, the last thing I want to do is just heap shame upon people because of my own passion and my own convictions on this. My hope with this, rather, is if you share a similar passion, or if you are open to hearing ideas around this topic that might light a fire in you, then maybe this is something that you could start to look at differently. Maybe this is the time in your life where you are ready to move on to a different church, or to stay in your church, but make some substantive changes as a result. Okay. I think I've sufficiently covered this topic. I think starting next week, I'm going to go in some new directions. Okay. But if anyone ever has more thoughts about this topic, you can always leave it in the comment section below, or head over to any article on perspectiveshift.co and leave it there. And love to engage with you on that. But Charlene adds, one can never know who in a non-affirming church is questioning. Just being transparent about your position could be beneficial to someone who's struggling. I love that, Charlene. Again, advocating for, if you're going to stay in your church, how can you stay in a way that is beneficial and valuable and integrous? I love that. Heather says, yes, more sojourns. All right. I like it. I'm not opposed to it. Sojourn Puerto Rico. Odette. If I go anywhere, it might be Puerto Rico. Then Shane adds, for me, the injustices intersect. Even if I don't have the bandwidth to care for everything equally, I try to see how the interlocking injustices also require interlocking passion, if that makes sense. It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. I think that's a beautiful way to put it and a beautiful way to live. All right, friends. Thank you so much for joining me today, this afternoon, or this evening. Go enjoy your dinner, Shane. Hopefully it's all ready for consumption. And hey, I'll see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. I've got a guest next week. His name is, oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry. I should have had this ready. 1 second. I want to tell you about it. Brian Elaine is going to be on the show with me next week. And he has worked on a book called How to Heal Our Divides. How to Heal Our Divides. So Brian's going to hopefully help us. Man, I'm just mumbling over the words today. Brian's going to be on next week to talk about healing our divides. There it is. That's it. I don't need to say any more than that. I love you all. It's been good with you. Have a great rest of week and weekend. And I'll see you next week. All right. Where's the ending button? Not there. Here it is. Bye.